an advantage that USI provides is having that ability to stay really exposed to all the verticals and all the use cases for drone technology and repurpose that into a lessons learned for companies like you that want to leverage us as a training partner. Welcome again to the Unmanned Podcast powered by USI. I'm Matt Hernandez, your host, and today we visit with Calvin Rieb, Cargill's global ROS leader. In this episode, Calvin and I speak about the fascinating way Cargill deploys drone technologies in the asset management space, and about the safety enhancements and the ROI this provides. Finally, as a fellow Black Hawk pilot, Calvin will talk about his transition from manned into the unmanned space. All that and more right now. Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. How about you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, and kind of get into what Cargill's doing with drones and the operations there.
Currently leading the drone program at Cargill. We commonly refer to it as a remotely operated systems program. We are a global company, so we do have global operations with drones and can certainly touch on some of those use cases. And I'm sure you have some questions on that later on. My background, I've been in aviation for about the past 20 plus years, started out working at an FBO, decided to join the Colorado Guard and Army, and started working on helicopters, then started flying helicopters, then transitioned to flying C-12s, which is a King Air 200, and then found myself at a consulting company where I started to get some exposure to drone technology and USI, and found that, hey, this is a up and coming and pretty cool industry, very similar to helicopters where there's a lot of segments. So why not, get more involved? I've been in Cargill for 6 years, as I mentioned before, and we've had quite the journey. We've quite the use cases as well. Let's see. And we do sit on the product advisory board for Flyability, which is a drone manufacturer, since Cargill is a small minority owner of them, and then sit on the MBAA ETC committee.
A little bit later on, we'll probably dig into that because as a Black Hawk pilot, we have some connection there. And I know I went through a transition period as well, figuring out drones in the unmanned space. And I'm sure you had a transition period that our audience would like to hear about. And I'm sure they're excited to hear about. But we'll stick with kind of what you're doing at Cargill right now. And maybe you can explain how they've integrated drones into their operations.
Yeah, so I'll kind of take you on the journey. Obviously, back in 2016 is when we had the Civil Aviation Authority and regulators start passing regulations that require licensing and registration of drones. So our initial approach was, let's make sure all drones are being operated safely and within the compliance of the regulator, whether it be Transport Canada, whether it be EASA or the FAA in the US. From there, we then started doing some proof of concept testing and trying to sell the technology to the businesses. Found it was a little challenging because they're just extremely busy with day-to-day operations. And ultimately, we were able to determine our best approach forward was to create a small service delivery team. And so if you look at where we're at today, we've got roughly 13 personnel in our program, and they're equally spread out between North America and South America. So we can support to the tip of Canada all the way down to the tip of Argentina. And we've got people geographically located in these different areas. Our use cases are primarily in asset inspections. We have a lot of assets. Cargill was founded in 1865, and it was all premised off of the grain bin, storing product from farmers and then taking it into the city and selling it. So in North America alone, we have like 10,000 plus grain bins. So we're pretty active in using drones, for those types of assets.
Yeah, that's interesting because for the uneducated person, like you think of Cargill as kind of tractors and agriculture, but you're talking much more broadly than that in, salt mines and other kind of asset inspections and things of that nature. So that's super interesting. And then you also have that international component. So was there some challenges in making sure that you met both the FAA here in the United States and then some of those other international requirements, but you had this kind of standardized approach to it?
Correct. Yeah. So I'd say our operations manuals, our approach to safety, our approach to compliance, how we operate the drones, the team's all very cohesive. And we actually do at times have folks from North America go support projects in South America or vice versa. And that's obviously legal as long as somebody has a license from that particular country. The bit of eye-opening pieces to international operations is actually outside of aviation purview, and that's on dealing with U.S. export control, ITAR regulations, tariffs, importation fees. That's actually been a bit of a barrier for us, and that was a steep learning curve. But we did have some great partners in Cargill that helped us navigate that.
Yeah, I bet that's super difficult to kind of make sure you're meeting all those legal requirements and make sure you're providing, again, that standardized service to all your customers. But based on that and what you've seen, the uses of drone technology at Cargill, what advantages have you seen compared to the traditional methods that would have been used prior to using drone technologies? How has that technology made you more efficient or mitigated risk maybe? Like what things have you seen?
So for us, we kind of have a slogan that we typically throw around. We say it's safer, it's more effective, it's cheaper, and we're getting better results or higher quality results. And so an example of that is when you look again, I'll continue to use the grain bin as the example because it's a common asset. That inspection was typically a 4-hour inspection where they had to set up a hoist or lower somebody down inside the bin. And they can only be suspended from that particular point of the bin. So they can't get up and close and personal to the wall. They can't really look underneath the roof. They're in a confined space. It's typically dark, cold, dirty, bugs. It's a bit of a hazardous environment. So now today, using like the flyability drone, hey, we're able to inspect that in 20 minutes, sometimes even within 10 minutes. So you're talking 1, 2, 3 flights in there, and you've got an extremely detailed set of data that we can hand off to the inspectors, and they can quickly determine is the asset usable or not. And then again, the data is the key component here, where it's helping leaders make decisions.
Now you got me worried. You said bugs in my grain. I mean, come on now. No, I get it. So, but you did say something that sparked my interest, and you talked about safety of this individual that before was getting lowered down into a grain bin, which we all, or a lot of folks, are familiar with how those are very, very dangerous to be in. So what were some of the safety enhancements that now we don't have a person up there at all? Or it's just everyone's on the ground and you send the drone in?
Yeah, it depends on the entry point. Some of the entry points are on the bottom, to your point, or to your what your comment was there. So you can open the entryway and put the drone in there and fly in. And then, on the exterior component of the inspection, and what was the previous approach? Well, it's using binoculars, which may not be that accurate. It's rappel access, so people are rappelling on the side, or using lift equipment. So that's also been a great benefit. Now we can send a drone inside to look at problems if we find one. Now we can fly outside, look and see, hey, is that problem continuing all the way through this concrete or steel structure? And now they've got the inside and outside data to make some quick decisions.
So that's probably easy to quantify too, like a return on investment, because some of the things that we hear is the drone technology can be quite pricey. You want to make sure you have professional aviators operating that technology. So that also has a bit of a cost. But I think, if we were to distill it all down, there's probably a big return on investment on moving into utilizing drone technology and uncrewed and unmanned operations. Have you kind of got some insight on that?
We do, yeah. So we are followed closely by our leaders here at Cargill and managers, and making sure that our value is somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3x of what their kind of operational budget or our operational budget is. And we're pretty on par with that. I would say it's pretty easy today for us to quantify that for every dollar we spend, we're giving $2 to $3 back to the company. It may not be a direct cost savings, but we're definitely helping with cost avoidances. And there's some other efficiency gains when we look at the qualitative benefits of saying, we can inspect 20 grain bins in one day, where traditionally that could take a whole week or 2 weeks. Those assets can go back up in service. So we're not disrupting the supply chain. We're maintaining throughput. There's a lot of secondary benefits. You've got good data to do comparison analysis over time. But to your point, the ROI is there. There definitely is some use cases that you could say, yeah, it's not a high ROI, but it's qualitatively creating a lot of value. For us, again, asset inspections is the area we found the hard ROI savings.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also difficult to probably, quantify a safety improvement because
Sure.
you never want to have an accident. But if you're removing the human and the person from that loop, then you're just vastly increasing the safety of that operation, that inspection, or any other kind of operation that would take place that we can replace a human with a technology.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know the name of the company, or I won't say the name of the company, but they literally invested in drone technology just to prevent these wrongful death lawsuits that they continue to have, because they kept having fatal events. And they're like, the cost of these are extraordinary. So there's also that. Hey, we're
Yeah.
spending a lot of money on the back end of these events. We could be proactive, mitigating this using new technology like drones. So, right. I mean, I think people are at different points in the journey. For us, every time we have a safety related event in Cargill, we do analyze that and say, hey, could drone technology have prevented that, or eliminated that particular task? And we do closely work with EHS. And I think that is one thing that's important for folks using drones in a big company like Cargill, making sure you're plugged into all the different functional groups, whether it be security, legal, EHS, your sustainability groups. There's a lot of opportunities using drones. And what you'll find is that data that you collect, maybe for the site manager, can also be used or touched by 3 or 4 other stakeholders.
No, that's a totally good point because you sometimes forget that what you're looking at might have a broader impact than just the one item you're trying to inspect. There might be an overall asset management that they're trying to keep track of things and items and serial numbered parts or something like this. So it's interesting to think about that one activity can actually have an impact on a broad range of departments in your workspace. And
Yeah.
speaking about the drones themselves or the technology, I don't know if you can share, or if you'd like to share, like what kind of technology and software are you using for these tasks that are the asset management and inspections?
So a lot of our hardware, like the drone technology, is going to be based out of Switzerland. So we in some of our software as well. And then we obviously use a Chinese company, DJI, for a lot of our quadcopter type activities. For post processing, Pix4D has been pretty good for us. We've benefited from them and been along with them for some time. And then we recently transitioned to a company software called iHawk. The company's name is Cyberhawk, and have kind of, I'd say, adjusted and morphed their software from traditionally being used in the utility generation distribution space to now ag space. And that's been great. That has been a big challenge. I think that remains an industry challenge, is data management. How do you quickly get it uploaded, post process, get that in the hands of the end users, and at what level of deliverable does that end user want? Some are good with just raw photos and videos, and others want these full, robust reports.
Yeah, if you're having like really detailed hyperspectral imaging and things of this nature, it's just taking tons of data. I mean, I've heard of folks doing a 3D model and landing with a terabyte of data and having to move that into a useful space. It is a challenge, and I was wondering if you could also speak on some other challenges that you might have faced during your time there at Cargill and developing the drone program and things of this nature. What kind of integration challenges or personal challenges did you experience while developing that program?
So, I mean, it definitely could be parsed out into the different sections. We could talk about training. Training is going to be easily relatable for you and USI, but training is a big one, actually. How do you? So, it kind of starts actually with finding the right talent. How do you find the right talent? Do you want somebody who's got a couple thousand hours on a Gray Eagle, or do you want somebody who has 1,000 hours on a Shadow? Do you want somebody who has flown drones commercially? Small quadcopters, a few hundred hours with that. That was one of our initial ones. And I got lucky with getting some really great talent early on, and they helped kind of parcel through. And we have an extremely solid team today. And I would say that we have a blend. Our approach was we'll go with half of our team coming out of universities like Embry-Riddle or UND, Liberty University as an example, or, and I shall say the other half being military. So we do have folks that have that Gray Eagle time. They've got that Shadow time, and that worked out well. And it's a good blend because you've got folks that are, to your point earlier on about flying Blackhawks. Hey, they understand checklist, they understand standardization, They understand risk management. But maybe your college folks, they're well versed in the technology itself. They understand the post-processing software. They're using more of the commercial products versus the military products like Falcon View, or things that you would never see in the civilian world. And then it's just the initial training, the recurrent training. There's USI provides some great structure, some great opportunities, some good instructors themselves to do in-person training. So we've leaned on that heavily, and that's helped us to make sure that we're meeting industry standards, or at least best practices. And one thing to call out is we all know the regulators are quite behind. So what qualifies you to be an instructor on drones? There's not a CFI rating for that, like you would see for an MEI. Rating as example.
Yeah, no, that's a great thing to point out. And I think an advantage too is, some companies are more, want to be more internal, but the problem is they don't have that external breadth of knowledge, and they don't see those best practices and exchange those kind of lessons learned that can feed back into training. And so I think that's an advantage that USI provides, is having that ability to stay really exposed to all the verticals and all the use cases for drone technology, and repurpose that into a lessons learned for companies like you that want to leverage us as a training partner. With regard to kind of what's the next steps, you talked about regulation and how it's ever changing. Like, where do you see the role of drones evolving in the agricultural space or the asset management and inspection over the next few years? How do you see that changing or that developing?
I mean, I'm hopeful that we'll continue to get good evolution and pragmatic regulations that are, being implemented to ensure the safe, but also free access to the technology and use of the technology. I think one thing is definitely changed over the past couple of years is we look at how drones are being repurposed and used in Ukraine and being used as kinetic weapons. So, I think that there is some concern now, and you're starting to see more release of counter-UAS rules, regulations, and maybe more broadly allowing for the removal of aircraft out of the sky by local authorities. So I think, like, on a negative note, that could be a bit challenging to navigate depending on how things go. Bad actors have been using drones, as you are aware, all the way back in Iraq, back in the time, early 2000s. So nothing new there, but I think the scale of it has just increased dramatically. And so it's really been an eye-opener to some. Beyond visual line of sight rules, everybody's been holding their breath, and most have probably passed out at this point. And, I think beyond visual line of sight rules are something that are way overdue, and they should have been rolled out in kind of a tiered approach. So folks like Cargill, we operate in pretty rural areas. We're not near controlled airspace. And the fact that, we have large assets, it's very easy for a drone to go, behind a big asset, and now you lose contact with it. So we follow Part 107. Hey, that's BVLOS. Doesn't seem like it's BVLOS, but when we actually stack that up against the rules, by all means, it's beyond visual line of sight. So I think it'll be exciting to get that out, to see the beyond visual line of sight rules out. Canada's released theirs. It takes effect in November. So I think that's going to probably be the next iteration. Folks operating about 55 pounds. It's there, but those are some interesting use cases that are obviously developing.
Having these rules and this structure around what's going on next, what's the next evolution, is so important. And I think it's really going to ignite the industry globally. But I also, whenever new rule comes out of the NFL, they start complaining, I can't believe they got to change the kickoffs. But, new rules and kind of experimenting with these new procedures is not always bad. I mean, that's how we learn whether something is going to stick and work and make sense. And hopefully our regulatory partners will ingest the feedback they receive from companies like yourself or USI. So is there any plan for Cargill to participate and stay in the forefront of the technology advances? Like, are you in any of the committees or any of the regulatory teamworks that are out there?
So currently just sit on the NBAA Emerging Tech Committee at this point. Haven't worked too much on any of the working groups or ASTM, JARIS. Just to be quite honest, been super busy here and making sure we're going in the right way and adoption is on track. One thing I would like to call out, though, is that groups like USI and others in the industry should be proud, though, that we've never had these major catastrophic events that have always been the doom and gloom of the FAA that, they've kind of constantly talked about. And one of the reasons why Part 108 has, I think, taken so long. Yes, we've had events where the Scooper airplane got hit by a drone, or LAPD helicopter got hit by a drone, or even a Black Hawk got hit by a drone. But, the great thing is that all those airplanes were able to recover, they're able to land, and we didn't have this mass casualty event that was constantly spread. And I think a lot of that is due to just how professional most drone operators are, and folks like USI keeping the industry at that standard and allowing to have that as a resource, right? So that you guys provide training, you provide the instructors, you provide curriculum, you're getting to high school students early on to develop them and say, yes, this could be viewed as a toy, but it's actually an aircraft. You're flying around other aircraft. And I think that's a great success story that USI should be proud of.
Some we always think about, and you discussed really early when we were talking before the podcast, but it's a kind of about diversity in the drone space and understanding and empowering, women in aviation and those maybe who are not as fortunate to go to an aviation school. And so some of those considerations, how does Cargill approach that in order to kind of have a more diverse set of professionals on board?
Yeah, I would say, it starts with our culture. We have a very strong culture around equity. We recognize the different groups and religions. And actually, before we typically start each of our larger meetings with a DEI moment or some type of inclusion moment, just to learn more about a culture so that folks have some awareness and make sure that everybody has a good level of respect. With regards to, how do we attract talent or how do we try to move people into industries, we definitely support internships. We've had internships in the past in our drone program. I think that's a good opportunity to get folks involved. The other one is when we send drone teams out to the sites, we make sure everybody's involved. We make sure that even some of those employees get stick time. We're not only there for safety, we're there to help improve employee experience. And probably the added benefit is letting them fly a drone once in a while.
Yeah, I mean, everyone gets excited when they get to have their hands on the controllers every once in a while, and especially when you feel a little more comfortable with support from somebody that has that experience. But there's also that ethical consideration too. You spoke about, Ukraine and the repurposing of the drone technology. Is Cargill doing anything along those lines to kind of address the ethical considerations?
I would say on the ethical side, we're constantly using the technology in a very high ethical manner. And one of the concerns we've always had is around privacy. So to give you an example, we have a very strong privacy policy around where we're using drones and how we're using drones at our facilities. And some facilities have very close adjacent residents. If we feel that community needs to be informed ahead of time, we'll actually go knock and hand out flyers that say, hey, we're flying drones. They're not going to be focused looking at your property or your family. We're actually using them at the Cargill site. So we also train all the operators as well that they're ethically using technology to look at the data or scope of the project versus, some other malicious activity.
No, that's great. That's something that's always on the, the mind of the customers. That privacy concerns and making sure that we're respecting privacy from the drone technology front and imagery and things of that nature. So that's good to hear about that, and that you guys are all considering that there. Remember what we talked about as Black Hawk pilots and back in the day, doing yanking and banking and flying the Hawks and having a great time, and then transitioning from that manned aviation mindset and from those times of operations, active operations. How did you transition into this drone space, and how did you, was it seamless? Did you run into challenges? What do some of our audience might have some issues there, and so what would help them?
Yeah, sure. So for us, at Cargill, we have the benefit of our program being inside of the corporate flight department. So we do have some business aircraft and jets, and so we have pilots, we have chief pilot, we have safety manager, we have the director of aviation. So we're in that environment, and that's also helped with the transition. I would say it was a bit of a blank slate, to your point. There's not a lot of resources or guidance. The Black Hawk has a very thorough checklist from startup to shutdown. When you buy a drone, Doesn't always have that. It's like going on YouTube and trying to figure it out. So we've spent a lot of time in standardizing our program, building our own checklist, having our own operations manuals. And I'd say the key thing in the drone industry is focusing on having a good safety reporting program and looking at all the events that are cataloged there as lessons learned, and how do we evolve and prevent either an accident, event, near miss, or technology problem. That's been the biggest steep learning curve, I would say, and the biggest takeaway I'd give folks is that you're going to have problems, you're going to have accidents, you're going to have events. Learn from those, prevent them. Yeah, luckily it's a drone. There was nobody in that aircraft. Hopefully it was a low-cost drone. But yeah, I mean, it's also parceling up, right? So you think back to Series 1000, 2000, 3000 series tasks in the Air Crew Training Manual. You're not going to take a new Black Hawk pilot up to 10,000 feet and say, let's do a hoist mission, or, hey, let's go do a night hoist goggle mission with 0 to little reference points. Yeah. Or let's fly the helicopter going forward, looking out the right-hand window with the HUD. You're just not going to do that. So I think folks do need to know that it does take time to become proficient with the equipment. It takes time to become proficient with the sensors. Post-processing is its own niche as well. So it takes time, but as long as you have formality around it, you'll be successful.
You're spot on. We come from a very rigid, standardized environment in the manned world, generally speaking. Even in general aviation with the Cessna, you have that checklist that kind of guides you through the startup procedures. But moving from that into the unmanned drone environment, it didn't come with that set of standards. We're starting to get there now, but you spoke about safety management systems, or SMS, and how it's important to have that. And it's easy to understand that when it's crew member on board or passengers on board. Everyone thinks like, oh man, we have to be safe, but sometimes they take it for granted in the unmanned space. But it's good to hear corporations like Cargill realize the importance of that, and that treating drone technology and drone activity equal or commiserate to manned activity in the national airspace, and with the same levels of safety rigor. And I think that's a testament to Cargill's professionalism, and it's important to recognize that. So for our listeners, can you share where can they go to find out more about Cargill and maybe your innovative practices in using drone technology, or maybe even if you're hiring and you have some open spaces, is there a website they can go to that you can share with them?
Yeah, if you Google Cargill drones, you'll come up with some public articles. And as far as learning more about Cargill, Wiki has a pretty good page on where Cargill is and who they are. As far as jobs, I would say go to cargill.com, look for careers. Currently, our program, we're in a bit of a holding pattern, but looking to grow. We have had some folks leave over the past few years and looking to replace them. Certainly with teams being built in Europe and even Asia, that's on our roadmap. So that there's even some global opportunities that exist. But I would say, hold out for the next 6 months at this point. But we will be looking for some growth probably after the next 6 months.
Yeah, and like any aviation operation, there's an ebb and flow with the hiring and how it goes when the pace or scope picks up, or there's some different changes in the crew member population. So that's not unusual. So for our listeners, just always be aware of where the drone space is being used. I mean, a lot of people might not even have known Cargill was using drone technology or had a drone team, and now they do, and that's super exciting. So I guess in the end, we just got to figure out one thing, Calvin, and that's which one of us has more flight hours. So where are you at in your Hawk days, and then where are you at in your fixed wing and drone? If you know them all.
Yeah, I don't know that I know the drone one. I have to go into drone logbook and check it out. But yeah, somewhere around north of 1750, I'm sure, somewhere right around there. So not quite a 2,000 combined, but working on it, getting there.
Nice. And for all my listeners, I'm over 2,000, so I win, and Calvin owes me a soda. Hey, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. This has been a great conversation, super informative. Any last words before we depart?
No, just thanks again for having me. For those listening, I would say make sure you follow your passion. If there's, the drone industry has a lot of segments, so you may not think you're using drones, or maybe you're just starting to look at using drones. Note that they are being used in a lot of different industries in a lot of different ways. So if affected today, you probably will be affected tomorrow by drones, and hopefully in a positive way.
Thanks, Calvin. I hope you all enjoyed hearing from him and learning more about Cargill drones. For more information on USI, please visit us at flyusi.org or email us at info@flyusi.org. As always, please like and subscribe, and we look forward to seeing you soon on the Unmanned Podcast.